Welcome to Epicenter, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and people driving decentralization in the blockchain revolution. I'm Friederike Ernst, and today I'm speaking with John Paller, who is the founder and chief steward of ETH Denver.
We're not crypto Denver, we're not blockchain Denver, we're not anything like that. We're very much Ethereum first. We were never propped up or supported by the Ethereum Foundation. We just did our thing, and they sort of just said, hey, that's part of a permissionless world, you know? Anybody can do an ETH event somewhere. I mean, as North America's largest event and probably the world's largest aggregator of Ethereum folks, we've done this for 9 years. I think that Agentic AI and coming on chain is probably the biggest innovation that we've seen in the 12 years I've been in it.
But it actually looks like increasingly traditional finance institutions are besting us at our own game, and they're executing extremely well.
So the only reason why crypto didn't scale bigger than it is, or didn't really make it in mainstream, is because we didn't have distribution.
Welcome to Epicenter, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and people driving decentralization in the blockchain revolution. I'm Friederike Ernst, and today I'm speaking with John Paller, who is the founder and chief steward of ETH Denver. ETH Denver just concluded the week before last, and it is typically one of the biggest crypto gatherings in the space. Before we talk with John, let me tell you about our sponsors this week.
This episode is brought to you by Lido. As Ethereum staking continues to evolve, more teams building staking products are running into a familiar challenge. On one hand, pooled liquid staking gives you liquidity and access to DeFi, but can limit customization. And on the other, bespoke staking setups offer more control over things like pricing, performance, and operator selection, but they often come with added complexity and less flexibility. Lido V3 is changing that with ST Vaults. ST Vaults is modular staking infrastructure. It lets builders and institutions deploy custom staking vaults tailored to their specific needs. At the same time, they're staying connected to SDETH as a shared liquidity layer powering Ethereum's broader DeFi ecosystem. If you're just looking for a place to generate yield on your idle assets, Lido Earn makes it super simple. It offers curated DeFi strategies built around SDETH. You deposit once, you choose a vault, and manage everything from a single interface. To learn more and start building with ST Vaults, go to lido.fi/ST Vaults and get in touch with Lido contributors today.
John, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Tell us about yourself. So before ETH Denver, what were you doing, and what pulled you into Ethereum in the first place?
I would say serendipity pulled me into the space, but the actual story goes a little something like this. So I was in the Uber of era in startups, right? Where, the Uber for laundry and the Uber for this and the Uber for that, right? So everybody was trying to build these marketplaces using apps to connect, the bid and the ask on things. And I was involved in that, and I was working on, I've been in the employment and HR tech space for a very long time. And so I was working on a project that was building, you could say, like the MLS system for recruiting.
What's an MLS system?
So the MLS system is like the real estate system that we use here in the US, where
Okay.
the buyer's agent finds the seller's agent and they get together and then they sell
Okay.
a piece of property. Well, we tried doing that with jobs, but some of the issues that we ran into were very, very challenging to scale it for lots of different reasons, and I'm not going to get into that. But I'd started talking about the democratization of employment back in 2005, before I knew anything about blockchains or smart contracts or Web3 or any of that stuff. Before that was even a thing, before Bitcoin was even a thing. I was thinking about these things, and I started studying economic models and social anthropology and incentive design, game theory. I started really digging into what makes things actually work the way that they work, right? I was curious to, really think about how could we create better systems that actually create more sustainable outcomes. But then in building this sort of platform for recruiters to like share information and share jobs or candidates or whatever. We really learned a lot about the game design of that industry. And in January 2014, I was at a technology conference in San Diego, California, and I happened to meet a guy by the name of Dmitry Buterin, who was also at the conference, and he and I became friends and stayed in touch on social media. And then later in 2014, I started seeing about the Ethereum white paper, and I was curious about what all that was, and I read it, and I'm not sure that I understood it. Actually, I know that I didn't understand it. But I had some early ideas of how to use the technology, and I was really intrigued by some of the, like after they did the Ethereum presale, I was intrigued. They like raised $15-16 million in like a matter of hours. And I'm just like, what? Like tokens? What is all this? Like, so it started getting me curious, and but I still hadn't had my sort of conversion moment, I guess you could say, my red pill moment. I hadn't had that yet. That came in early 2016, and I was talking with, well, my CTO at the time for my startup, and he was like, no, blockchains, no, it's not going to be a thing and all this. And I'm just like, yeah, but we're in the middle of all of these issues as a company. Like, wouldn't it be better if we just had code that sort of ran everything, and then we could just not be in the middle? Like, so behavior is organized based on the properly designed incentives, and he just was not having it. And I was speaking with another colleague of mine, and he was big into Bitcoin and a few other things that were going on at the time. And, he got kind of, I wouldn't say he got mad at me, but he kind of proverbially grabbed me by the ears and said, John, you're not paying attention. This isn't technology for corporations. This is going to rewire the entire system in a way that we're going to build all new things. And like, I'd always been thinking about blockchain tech as like an efficiency capture. I mean, technology has always been, in terms of corporations, like, let's make it cheaper, let's make it better, let's make it faster. So we have a market edge, right? We can build a moat of some sort. Well, it finally dawned on me. I was like, oh, wait, this is going to change everything.
The apes
And
together, strong moment.
you had this like, whoa, it's kind of like Neo coming out of the Matrix,
Yeah.
going like, my whole life changed. And, up to this point, I had a recruiting business that, was very nice business. And I had a startup that, did pretty well. And, all of a sudden I just lost interest in all of that. So, and I couldn't change it. It was just like, once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Well, then I was talking to Dimitri, and I was asking him like, about developers and like all this, because I had all these ideas, and I at the time I didn't really understand how to code anything, and I was the entrepreneur guy, so I needed a few devs to like, but I didn't even know what I wanted to build yet. So the only people I could get in touch with were people that wanted like $400 or $500 an hour just to like, build you some little prototype thing. And like, if you don't know what you want to build, they don't know what to build you. So, it wasn't just like a hacking thing. Like, hey, let's try, let's just figure some stuff out. So that didn't exist. You couldn't find anybody that knew Solidity. So, I found my way to the Ethereum Denver meetup that was started by a guy by the name of Kent Barton. And Kent just had a passion for education and community. And, I started going when it was pretty small. And then, it grew in the spring of 2017, like exponentially. And it was one of those things where it went from like, low double digits to like 400 or 500 people every month wanting to come to this thing. And, so I started getting more involved, and I was asking Kent and the guys that were running it, I was like, have you guys thought about doing a hackathon? I mean, there's like all these people here that like don't know anything about Web3 or, smart contracts, but they're curious, right? Everybody wants to know about Ethereum. It's this like Cambrian explosion of interest. And so we asked a question one time at the meetups. It's like, who would be interested in attending a hackathon? And like, half the room or more raised their hand. And I was like, well, we should do that. And they're all like, well, we tried a hackathon one time and didn't really go anywhere. And blah, 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 blah. It's just, I don't know. It was just not, they didn't want anything to do with it really. Because they had said they had tried it and it didn't work. So then I
So
said,
how
well,
did you sway them?
I didn't sway them. I just went and did it. So I told them, I was like, well, I'm going to go do this. So, and they're like, well, all the reasons why. And I was like, look, we're going to make Colorado the epicenter of blockchain and Web3 innovation. And we're going to, why don't we get 300 or 400 people together? And like, what? Is this like, we got like 30 people last time and it was sort of weak. I was like, no. I'm talking about like, let's bring in the best educators, the people that know this. Let's bring in Vitalik. Let's bring in like all these people to do this. Why not? And so they're like, well, if you want to, go for it. So I started reaching out to guys like Joe Lubin and Vignesh from Lendroid and, the guys from 0x and McLean from NewCipher and, just a whole bunch of people, right, that were early, Joe Lubin from Consensus, of course. And I said, look, so I put together like a deck and I said, well, like, look, here's what you would get. And, will you support this hackathon? Like, we want to build some devs. And at the time, like, there were no devs. So like, everyone's like, yeah, we should build some devs. So what we thought was going to be, 300-400 people ended up being 1,500 people the first year. And it just, it kind of hit the right sort of notes. The location was good because everybody could get to Denver from, either coast pretty easily. The airport's very easy to get to. Cost of living's low. We used to do it over the President's Day weekend because, we wanted to give people an extra day to travel, especially students. And we did it for free because we didn't want to paywall learning how to do this. Like, you're not going to get people who are curious about something to come spend $500 on an event. So like we just didn't like any of that model. So we said it's like, community of communities and like let's build some stuff, right? We invented the Biddle meme at ETH Denver 2018. So the whole hodl for Bitcoin, we built our version of it for Ethereum, which was Biddle, which has now been mentioned on X like 90 million times or something like that. So yeah, so that's how it kind of got started. I mean, it was out of the need for devs. It just nobody had any, and I didn't have any, and I wanted to build some. And then, it just sort of took off. And then we're like, well, we should do it again. And then, so we did it again in 2019. And then we did it again in 2020. And there just was a lot of demand for it. And so it got a lot of recognition internationally. I mean, even the first year we had people from 35 countries come in. And now, I think this year there's 140 countries or something represented over, 6,000 people or something that came in. So, and this is significantly smaller than it has been. It's been about 20,000 people or more the last several years. So, all the tourists are gone, right? So it's mostly just the core community, people who really care about this, and decentralization and the kind of ethos and values of Web3. So that's how it got started. And, 9 years later, here we are. So we just finished our 9th season.
Yeah, before we kind of get into how it's changed over the years, did you find your devs for your project?
Oh yeah, I did. And then so, yeah. I can pretty much get anybody. I can get anybody I need now. Yeah, I know a few people.
Cool. Tell me how kind of the format of ETH Denver kind of developed over the years, and kind of how that corresponds with kind of the sort of people who attend.
Yeah, well, there's narratives that form in the ecosystem, and I've been pretty good at seeing them before they happen. Um, like we predicted DeFi, 18 months before DeFi summer happened. We saw it. We saw it early, and we said, oh, all this on-chain lending and derivatives and all that's going to be really big. And then, DeFi summer happened, and it was just like, whoa, that was, post ICO boom. That was probably the biggest sort of driver of things. But then the narratives started shifting, right? So then it got into NFTs, and then it got into DAOs, and then it gets into all sorts of stuff. Right now it's prediction markets, and now it's, perps and whatever. But if you look at the undercurrent of all of it, it's all financial use cases, right? It's all about, well, you could even argue that a lot of this is just neo casinos. Not that the stock market itself isn't really a giant casino, because it is, but we're kind of in the wild, wild west, and, the asymmetric gains that people can get by playing the roulette of, well, meme coins is another one, right? Let's get in early and pump and then pump and then dump, right? So people don't really care about these projects. They don't. I mean, there's a few that they do, but for the most part, these are vehicles for asymmetric upside. So it's gambling. So what happened in terms of the event was, we were never propped up or supported by the Ethereum Foundation. And we have a lot of friends there, but we just did our thing, and they sort of just said, hey, that's part of a permissionless world. Anybody can do an ETH event somewhere, and the market physics are going to determine who wins and who loses. And so we were just really good at sort of predicting the kind of what's next, right? So every time one of these cycles would come up, we would see it coming, right? And now we're in the institutional phase with stable coins and, modernizing the current financial systems infrastructure and whatever. And we saw that coming, with the President Trump's election. That was pretty much inevitable that was going to happen. And here we are. It's happening. So we pretty much let the market dictate what the kind of format was going to be. So as people became more interested in booths, for example, we figured out a way to cater to that. Now, what was that really about? It was about the need for engagement. They want to talk to people. They want their brand to be seen. So we appropriated space for that. When Vitalik started talking about the scaling roadmap for Ethereum and the need for L2s and what that meant to the ecosystem, what that was really saying to the market is, hey, we're kind of admitting that Ethereum by itself can't scale. And so we're going to leave it to the market to figure out what the solutions for that are. This is very on brand for Ethereum. They'll just kind of throw stuff out. Vitalik will just throw stuff out, and then people will just build things, right? And so L2s became prominent, and then all L1s or EVM L1s, and all this kind of stuff happened. So the demand for the same stuff was always there. Booths, developers, speaking opportunities, the hackathon, engaging developers, hiring developers, all these things were very, very hot topics. And so we just happened to attract everybody that wanted to be participating in that. I mean, as North America's largest event and probably the world's largest aggregator of Ethereum folks, we've done this for 9 years, and I think we've even had a higher attendance than DevCon in aggregate. So it's been a big thing, but we've really kind of let the market dictate it, because again, open, permissionless, decentralization, sort of, we never really tried to fabricate much. Now, I would say today, though, some of those choices, Ethereum doesn't have as strong as a narrative, I think, as, say, Solana does. No one can really tell you what Ethereum's narrative is, because it just is and just does, right? And so those of us who are still very passionate about Ethereum are passionate about Ethereum because it's really the only credibly decentralized blockchain, in my opinion. There are some that are doing great things, like our friends at Near are doing great things. There's the guys at Base are doing great things as an L2. There's lots of interesting things happening around the space, but that doesn't mean necessarily anything to us. So we try to keep things as market-based as possible, but then, as Ethereum sort of just kind of took, its own intentionally sort of quieter voice, from especially the foundation's perspective, other voices have tried to become more prominent, which, has definitely made it a challenge for us to manage that, being ETH Denver, right? So we're not crypto Denver, we're not blockchain Denver, we're not anything like that. We're very much Ethereum first. But managing that's been really interesting because the narratives have been tried to push here and there based on what other people's interests are. But we've tried to kind of manage it based on market kinetics, and then also just what we feel like is, at least net neutral to Ethereum or net positive for Ethereum.
This episode is brought to you by Near AI Cloud. OpenClaw is one of the biggest stories in AI right now. Rapidly, it gained over 200,000 GitHub stars with adoption from Silicon Valley to Beijing. Why? Because OpenClaw makes it easy to create an AI agent that actually does stuff, like manage your emails, browse the web, schedule appointments, and remember contacts across weeks of interaction. But where do you securely store and run an always-on agent that needs persistent access to your most sensitive data? Local deployment means you have to manage expensive hardware at home, and traditional cloud means surrendering full access to your data to some cloud provider. Near AI Cloud solves this problem by running OpenClaw inside trusted execution environments. These are hardware-level secure enclaves where your agent operates in encrypted memory that even Near AI can't inspect. It's not a promise that they won't look, it's cryptographic guarantees that they can't. With OpenClaw on Near AI Cloud, you get cloud convenience without data exposure. There's no hardware to manage and no trust assumptions required. You can learn more at near.ai.
What do you think the narrative should be, and what do you kind of see as competition for that?
What do I think the narrative should be? Well, that's a good question. I think that Ethereum, like the foundation, should take a more prominent role in discussing the roadmap of where the community should go. I think they should. That is not a position that they share, at least not up till this point. I think, I've worked a lot with Tomasz, and he's done an excellent job. He's still executive director for 3 more days, I guess. But he's done an amazing job at sort of creating more, I guess you could say, structural vision and just, like intentionality around moving to where the puck is and like actually even guiding where the puck goes.
No more the
Whereas-
infinite garden.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was never, I'm a 25-year entrepreneur, okay? The infinite garden always came off to me as a little naive and a little bit unrealistic. I think it's not uncommon for people younger, especially in their young 20s, to like have idealism as their sort of core philosophy. Like, I mean, look back in history, this is not the first time that youth have been idealistic about how things should be. We're just now sort of taking a technological viewpoint to it versus something that's a little bit more just, analog. But like still, I think human behavior is a very complex thing, and you can't assume that people are just going to behave in ways that on paper make sense. Like humans don't always follow what you think are good incentives, or they might not always do what you feel like is the right thing. And because the right thing is somewhat dependent on who you ask, right? There's infinite amounts of like individual incentives and goals, and then whoever gets to define what's best for the collective, who gets to decide that, right? Like, I mean, there's so many variations of outcomes, in other words, that like designing a technological system for that is very hard, where incentives are aligned at scale sustainably. And so the infinite garden thing, I don't know. I mean, I just I think it's a little too simplistic, and I think it's a little too idealistic. Now, do I believe in positive sum games? Yes. Do I believe in moving from a scarcity-based mindset or economic model to one that's based in abundance design? Yes. Do I believe that technology and crypto economics and the tokenization of all the things and has the ability to drive those outcomes? I believe that. I'm still in the camp that I think Web3 is going to be a thing, especially with the advent of agentic AI on chain. I think if you expect human beings to use complex, user interface to like sign a transaction or manage a private key, if you think that's going to happen at scale, you're high. It's not going to happen. People aren't going to do it. But if agentic AI becomes a thing, does it matter what blockchain they're working on? Does it matter what token they move from here to there or whatever, or how that money gets to you? It doesn't. So I think that agentic AI and coming on chain is probably the biggest innovation that we've seen in the 12 years I've been in it. Yeah, the infinite garden, I just I don't know. It's very complex, and the notion of abundance at scale to where private property is not necessary and all these other things. I don't know. I don't see it in my not infinite experience, but I've got enough to know a few things, and I've got a few gray hairs to prove it. Like, I don't have the comprehension of that in our lifetime, but I do still have lots of hope, and there's a huge amount of opportunity now with agentic AI combined with the primitives that we've built already for a decade, and building these now into really usable systems that could very well disrupt most of what we know in the financial system. And whether that's going to be dystopian or a super positive thing, I don't know yet, but I think it's worth a try.
But what does that mean in terms of kind of the global vision for Ethereum? Is it kind of the global financial settlement layer? Is it the world computer? Is it the anti-censorship layer? Kind of like any of these narratives in principle kind of work technically, right? But kind of putting one front and center would help the story, because people inherently kind of they like stories, right? Kind of if you say, okay, these are the docs, that's not a very good story. And if you say, look, this is credibly neutral, and because it's very decentralized, it's also extremely resilient. That also doesn't move people, right? So kind of like, why would you care? So what do you think the story should be here?
To the average person?
Yeah.
Or to whom?
I mean, so I think that's a fair question. So kind of both kind of to the people whom we want to build on this infrastructure rather than say Solana or Base or Near, and to the people kind of who end up using it. So kind of like if you had to explain to your non-crypto friends why Ethereum is better than Solana, what do you say?
Well, I mean, that's an easy one. I mean, Solana isn't just sufficiently decentralized, in my opinion, and that's just a function of how many nodes they have validating their blocks. Their uptime is questionable. Their downtime is unacceptable. And quite frankly, the only use case that they've demonstrated is meme coins at this point. So if they've got other things up their sleeve, that's fine. And I'm rooting for everybody more so in the space than I am for the banks. Okay. So like, don't get me wrong. I'm not like anti-Solana. Like, I have my criticisms but it's based on just objective understanding of, how these things work. Now, their design decisions, they are going to argue one set of things, that they made these choices about scaling and getting product market fit and all that over pure decentralization, and then we'll decentralize later. Well, it doesn't always work that way, right? Like, people in power are very unlikely to give up power, right? So I don't know. I have my criticisms about it. I would say DYOR, do your own research. Figure out what you care about, and then align that with what you feel like the objective analysis is. Actually, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, these are all good tools nowadays to actually like ask them, like, what are the features of a good blockchain? Like, theoretically, what should it be? And do a comparison analysis against all of the major chains, and it'll tell you. It's not hard to figure out like which ones are actually doing it. Ethereum isn't impenetrable. Ethereum isn't the guaranteed winner. I think that Ethereum, what I said earlier about Ethereum needs to take a more prominent role in figuring itself out as far as like what its actual stated goals are versus these theoretical sort of pseudo-religious narratives, right? Whereas, oh, the infinite garden. It's like, yeah, okay, well, that's not really actionable. Like, how are we actually getting there? And what should we be doing as, people in the ecosystem? So what should the narrative be? My point of view is I think the global settlement layer is probably the most likely. Everything gets built. Well, trustlessness is important, right? You don't have to trust somebody on the other end of a smart contract transaction if we do this correctly, right? And I don't have to trust the people running the blockchain either because it just is and does, right? It just works. So however we get there, I think largely, well, there was a piece that I saw somebody write that said, well, the non-financial use cases for blockchain, no, they're all financial uses. They're all financial uses. DAOs are all financial. NFTs are financial. They're all financial in some way. Like, I think it's the world economic layer, right? So how do we actually engage in commerce with each other globally? I think it happens on Ethereum. Now, why the institutional adoption makes a lot of sense is because, quite frankly, it's going to be much easier to get people to do things when they're already on chain. We were never able over 10 years to get people to come on chain in droves unless it was for a particular thing like buying an NFT. But they didn't want to do everything else in there. They didn't want to do social on chain. They didn't want to do all these other things because it's too complex. It's not cheaper, better, faster, which is kind of the rule of thumb. So like if you're not going to get to cheaper, better, faster, people aren't going to use it long term unless you're incentivizing them by a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not enough.
But it actually looks like increasingly traditional finance institutions are besting us at our own game, and they're executing extremely well, right? So kind of if you look at kind of what Stripe is doing with integrating stables and crypto rails directly into global payments infrastructure, and if you look at what kind of brings people on chain or kind of what gets them tokens, it's the Revoluts and Binances of the Robinhoods. Then BlackRock is tokenizing assets on Ethereum. So kind of in many ways, kind of these players are shipping faster user experience and reaching more users than native crypto teams,
Well,
right?
yeah, they have natural distribution too. I mean, Stripe already has a huge distribution network for their analog products, right? So Web 2 is not an unfamiliar thing to any of these guys. They already
So
have
what does that
distribution.
say about us? That kind of like we've been trying to do this for 10 years and kind of failing.
Well, it says that we were trying to tackle too many things at once. I think we were trying to innovate technology, right? We're trying to prove entirely new economic models. And we're trying to get users to opt in to using something that's more difficult than just signing into your bank. All at the same time. And trying to get product market fit for completely new things. I mean, we're trying to boil the ocean. And for trying to boil the ocean, we did pretty damn good. But like what I'm saying is when everybody comes on chain, and look, I'm just going to say it, but like it's kind of like when the Roman Catholic Church was formed, it got, how it got formed? I mean, the Emperor Constantine was basically faced with a situation in Rome where there was all of these sects of Christianity that had popped up. And they didn't even really call it Christianity back then, but there's all these various sort of things happening in Rome, and it was a lot, okay? And they basically, uh, TLDR, Constantine said, well, if you can't beat him, join him. He couldn't stop it. He tried, or even his predecessors tried. But he claimed that he had this big vision where the Roman army had this big cross on their shield, so he felt compelled to convert to Christianity, and then oh, well, we're just gonna make it the state-based religion and all this. Well, what was that really? That was a co-opting of Christianity is what it was. So the principles of Christianity were up for debate. You had dozens and dozens of various types of sects believing different things, and he wanted to consolidate it to one thing, and then he outlawed everything else, right? So the Council of Nicaea and all the kind of canonization of the Bible and all of that became a thing. So that was kind of like the institutions taking over crypto. Now, fast forward, 1,800 years, 1,700 years, and where are we now? Well, Christianity is all over the globe, and it's not just the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church is a very small component of overall Christianity, although there are a ton of Catholics. But generally, Christianity is a worldview now more than it is just a religion. Okay, it is kind of how a lot of people operate from a principles perspective, and it all started. You can trace it all the way back. And the real scaling of it happened with Rome. What's different? It's really not that different. It's just going to accelerate a lot faster because it's technology. And it's not just, I don't have to get on a horse and go travel somewhere or get on a boat and go travel somewhere to spread the good word. I can literally type it into a Reddit chat and I can do whatever I want. But if the banks are on chain and all the payment companies are on chain and everyone's on chain and everyone learns how to use these things, and Agentic AI is kind of running around doing things for you on chain, what's to stop decentralized applications from then already having access to distribution?
So kind of let me push back a little bit. So kind of if you kind of look at Jesus's kind of kind of the statements that he actually made, kind of they are not very commensurate with kind of what Christian doctrine is today, right? And I did not see the podcast going this way, so kind of I'm a little rusty on my
I'm only using it as an
my
example,
Bible
not to be precise.
yeah, I know. But in the same way, kind of that kind of Constantine kind of co-opted Christianity as a tool, kind of banks and financial institutions are doing the same, right? Kind of like they're not using it as a paradigm shift, like kind of we thought should happen, in the sense that kind of like this enables coordination at unprecedented scale, and kind of it allows collective ownership of whatever, and kind of distributed reward systems, and kind of just making everything fairer and better for the little man. Kind of I mean, even kind of the platformification argument that kind of you alluded to in the very beginning, with kind of like the Uber of this and the Uber of that, kind of like if everyone kind of came onto the same platform, we wouldn't have the problem, and kind of like your HR problems would have gone away, and so on. So kind of the idea that kind of this would be a paradigm shift in kind of how societies work, that is done away with by banks just using it as a backend upgrade, right? By kind of saying, okay, in principle, kind of we're now we're kind of we're
But what's the bank's mode though? So I agree with you that that if that's where it ends, then we've completely and totally failed.
Yeah.
If that's where it ends. And I think for some people, the co-opting of crypto by the banks, by the financial institutions, is failure. I think some people actually believe this. What I'm saying though is, once the cat's out of the bag or the genie's out of the bottle, when it comes to the tools, the crypto tools, and making it easier for people to just function on chain, how do you stop any of these other things from resurging again?
But
What's the
I'm
bank's
kind
moat? Like, what's if I can cut out? So let's put it this way: the banks coming on chain isn't going to save me any money as a consumer. It's not going to save me a dime. They're not going to charge me less for my Visa transactions that I swipe because they settle it on Arbitrum or whatever. Okay, they're not going to charge me less. It's a way for them to automate and abstract complexities away on their end, so they can charge me more probably. Okay,
yeah.
when PayPal charges you, or even anybody charges you just to move crypto around, well, we're charging you 2.5%. It's like, why are you charging me 2.5%? It's the same thing that we're already doing. Why do I care about crypto? Because supposedly it's peer-to-peer cashless transactions. I pay a small fee. I send money to you. You receive it on chain. I can verify that you received it on chain because the blockchain said it happened. And all we're doing is moving the ledger numbers around, at the end of the day. And cool. It's great.
But it's not
Right?
fungible. It doesn't compose, right? Kind of like, say you're
Right.
on Revolut, kind of like your ETH on Revolut. You can't do anything with that with it that they're not explicitly permitting you to do, right? Kind of.
Right. What I'm saying though is like so the only reason why crypto didn't scale bigger than it is, or didn't really make it in mainstream, is because we didn't have distribution. So if you look at the adoption curve of things, like there's the typical adoption curve. We were down here in the early adopters, right? So those people are willing to do things that other people aren't, to adopt things based on philosophy. It's based on an ethos. And we got all those guys, okay? So we started building things for those guys because they're willing to do all the things and sign all the transactions and degen all the things and whatever. But we could never get up into the steeper kind of pieces of the mid adoption and the later adoption and all that. We could never get there. And it's because, again, we're trying to do too many things at once, and we just didn't have distribution because it's not easy to use. So we never solved UX, we never solved UI, and we basically are now looking to solve it through institutional adoption. But I don't think it stops there. In the end, what are the banks going to be able to do to protect their moat? Like, is it going to be possible that regulated, collectively owned digital cooperatives, for example, exist on chain? Yeah, it's going to happen. So credit unions at scale, high frequency, ethereal, network stake-based credit unions are going to eat the banks. Okay, but that's once everybody's on chain. We weren't able to do it because no one's on chain and nobody knows what it is. Nobody trusts it. It's like, oh, it's too sperry. Oh, Terra Luna. Oh, SBF. Oh, ICOs. Oh, meme coins. Oh, Trump. It's like, okay, let them go on chain. And then we're going to build around it. And we're going to basically build better products than what the banks have. And once the distribution networks are on chain, now we can actually do the things that we want to do. It was too ambitious to completely, without simplicity and users and like for users, you can't get everybody to do it, even if it's the best thing ever. Now, I'll just use my own experience, okay? If I have a choice to take out an Aave loan against my assets or to deal with a bank forever and over and over and over and over again with my KYC and this and that and all this, I would even rather KYC with Aave, just, have my portable. I was talking to the SEC about this last week. Let's have portable KYC. And there's companies working on this, right? That actually, like, for example, if I had a company that I went to and got my identity verified, I could go get my KYC. It's on my wallet. It's a soul-bound token. I could go to Aave. I can automatically log in. It's verified that I'm good. And then I can put up my assets and I can take out a loan.
Yeah.
Why would I want to deal with a bank? Why would I ever go to a bank if I can just do that? Okay, the answer is I wouldn't. But we didn't do it because nobody knows about any of this. And it's like they don't trust it. But once it becomes normal, people are going to do it. And they're going to leave banks in droves because they don't really want to deal with banks, but they're necessary evils.
I financed my house with a Maker CDP years ago. So kind of it's
There you go.
but to be fair, I would have gotten a better rate with my local bank. But it doesn't matter. Well, actually, I got a fantastic rate because I borrowed I borrowed USD, so kind of and paid for my house in euros. So it's yeah. Anyways, I want to share your enthusiasm, but I don't for various reasons. So kind of this idea that kind of we just need to get people here and then we can get them to care about this. I think this is something
They don't
that's
care
very-
about it.
So kind of exactly.
No,
so
they
kind-
don't care about it.
because I've actually had my people call kind of pretty regular people about ownership. So kind of we kind of kind of my company knows this. So kind of we were going to start an on-chain neobank that's kind of like the modern version of a cooperative bank, right? Where basically everyone kind of co-owns the bank, and kind of that means, and I mean, cooperative banking, it used to be huge. It's still huge in some parts.
It's
of the
still
world.
used used in the U.S. regionally. It's not a national
So
scale
kind of
thing, but regionally, it's very big here.
It's actually this is funny because kind of it's kind of it shows you that Germans are kind of the sort of people who kind of bring spreadsheets to the party. So kind of we have we are on the UNESCO World Heritage intangible world heritage list for cooperative banking. So kind of, and I mean other countries have like Italy has pizza culture, and Belgium has beer, and Spain has flamenco, and kind of we have cooperative banking. That's how cool we are. So so yeah, so kind of so
Very
we
German
found a
of
lot
you.
of people, very German of us. Yeah. So kind of so we polled a lot of people about ownership and kind of showed them pictures of, okay, this is Revolut. It's a $1 billion company. You helped build it. You own 0%. The investors own 70%. The founders own 30%. How does that make you feel? And people don't care. So the thing is, the sad thing is, people don't care because they comfortable not to care.
Well, I think it's more, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, I don't know, because kind of for other problems that kind of have a similar output matrix, kind of we also don't care. So kind of if you, for instance, look at privacy, so kind of everyone knows that kind of having a Proton email is probably better than having a Gmail. It's also free. Kind of it offers feature parity, but for some reason still everyone has a Gmail address because people are lazy and they don't like to move, right? So kind of in principle,
Honestly,
having
change is hard.
12 us.
Well, and I think the reality is the worst that people have used our data for is to try to sell us more stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if they started using it politically or to put you in jail, I think you'd care a lot
But
more.
we are using it politically. Kind of they are.
Yeah, they're starting to more.
Yeah.
They are definitely. Look, I agree with you that there is a possibility that regardless of how much good intention and good economic modeling and incentive structure that we build, that humans, because of human frailty and laziness, are just going to default to what's easiest. Now, if we can make it easiest to do the things that are, better for them, that's how you win. You've got to make it cheaper, better, faster. If you can't make crypto cheaper, better, faster, that's how market physics work. Cheaper, better, faster. The reason why Google wins is because it's fully integrated into everything. It's OAuth into everything. Like, I can manage it. I can do it from my phone. They've made user experience so easy that, like, I'm literally willing to trade my privacy for it.
It's terrible,
Okay.
isn't it?
It is. And I can't say that I'm completely innocent on that. Like, I probably am on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of like living all of the Web3 principles, and probably 50-50. Like I'm 60-40 maybe, if I'm generous to myself. So I don't know. I think that big organizations are not going to go down without a fight. I think they're going to try to protect or co-opt anything that gets in their way, even quietly if they can. Like the whole stablecoin thing, the Maker CDP, we don't even really do make or die anymore. Like it's still there. You can still do it, but like the collateral that we use was largely USDC. So it's like you're collateralizing with a counterparty asset, like it's not
It's every
Ethereum
real
anymore.
world assets now. It's T-bills and so on because kind of
Yeah, it's going more that direction.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I mean, and some of that's not all bad, but like I mean, at least the permission to use it is permissionless, right? So whether or not you've got counterparty risk, I mean, the U.S. financial system has a ton of counterparty risk. So, I mean, the whole global economic system has a ton of counterparty risk. So like to say that, oh, well, DAI is not sufficiently decentralized, it's not like USDC doesn't have counterparty risk. Of course it does. So like, yeah, the volatility is probably the weapon or the enemy of decentralized stablecoins, because even 1% volatility seems like a lot when you're moving around a lot of USDC, right? So people don't like it. So they like the solid peg of $1 is $1. They like that. And that's how USDC got its market dominance in the US. And that's how USDT got it internationally, It's just parity. It's always a dollar. Anyways, I don't disagree with you. I'm saying best case scenario, the way I see it, and the thing I'm working toward is, look, I think the financial system coming on chain is inevitable. I think it makes sense for them. I think if I'm them, there's huge greenfield opportunities and market share and all sorts of revenue streams that can come from this. I mean, stablecoins are probably the most profitable use case that have come out of crypto.
Yeah.
So it's inevitable and natural that they would do that. It's very rational thinking on their behalf. So I'm not going to get in the way of that, but I almost think like to an extent it's like bringing the Trojan horse inside, because once everyone's using these things more commonly, and if we legitimately figure out scaling issues where we're not paying 2 and 3% for, where I can literally send you a wire transfer peer to peer with, cost me 25 cents, people are going to use it if it's easy to use. For example, easy to use to me would be, imagine a future state where I have a self-sovereign AI agent bot, okay? And let's call him Buffy, okay? So Buffy is my bot, and I just, one day he's on my phone, he's in my Telegram, I was like, oh man, I forgot to send Friederike that $50 that I owe her. Can you send that to her right now? Done. I don't need to sign anything. He's already got access to a wallet that has some discretionary money. He can go do it right now. He can even send me back if I want the Etherscan transaction receipt. And it's just done.
OpenClaw can already do that, and it doesn't.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, but imagine it being so easy, the average guy down the street's doing it. Okay.
But OpenClaw
I'm
is
just saying,
super easy to use. Have you?
I know, but of course I've tried it. Like we just had a huge component of ETH Denver that was all claws out AI OpenClaw agents. We built literally Buffy bot, the thing I'm talking about, to be the co-host of the opening ceremonies. We built an AI agent to do that. So like, it doesn't even have to be 5 years from now. But what I'm saying is it might take 5 years for your next door neighbor down the street who knows nothing about crypto to be doing this. But it will inevitably happen though, because it's like, oh, well, crypto's not scary because it's now everyone uses it. Right?
Okay.
Right now, nobody wants to touch it. It's an evolutionary thinking. It's partially generational thinking, and it's part just evolutionary thinking around what's acceptable, what's scary, what's risky. And once things are not seen as risky, people are just going to do it.
So kind of when we zoom out, by what metric do you think we should monitor to see whether blockchain is actually making the world a better, fairer place? So kind of, is it things like, I don't know, self-custody adoption or new cooperative models or censorship resistance or capital formation without intermediaries. I mean, there's an endless list, right?
Oh my goodness. What are the metrics?
Sorry, it's
there's-
just a little bit of kind of like it's kind of like putting my finger on it, because I feel like it's something sometimes where we idealists kind of we blank, right? You say, oh, but clearly this is better infrastructure, clearly this is fairer for people, clearly this is, but kind of like how will people's lives actually improve?
Well, I think a common metric is GDP per capita. I think right now, for example, cooperatives contribute to about $600 billion in GDP for the US. I think it'll be really interesting to see, like, how are we going to measure the network state GDP? Not the US GDP, not the German GDP, not the EU GDP, but like the GDP of the network state, meaning on-chain. I think that's a really interesting metric to follow. I think that you're going to see active daily users balloon, but then we got to know, like, what does that mean? Like, how much, what does that equate to in terms of transactions? So I think average transaction might be an interesting metric to see.
So
And like
it's better if
geographically,
Yeah.
geographically, where are people using it? Like, if the network state really takes hold, you're going to see people globally doing business with each other. And that's going to be pretty hard to get away from seeing it. And I don't think it's going to be easy to measure like India's GDP versus the US GDP. I think you're going to have to start measuring network state GDP. So, and then what is that? How do we actually analyze that in the context of what we know is existing kind of metrics and fundamentals? I don't know the exact metric that's going to nail it. Like the North Star metric that you might say in like a business pitch, like, well, here's our North Star metric. Here's how we measure everything. I'd have to think on that for a little while. But like, I think it's probably something around on-chain activity. Like, we look at ghost chains, right? They have all this activities, but then you look at it and there's no one really moving anything around. It's just nonsense. Ethereum is probably the best one because you can see the total active users or the monthly active users. You can see the transaction volume. And that's sort of a correlation to ecosystem health. Now, how do we see the difference between whether somebody at BlackRock is using Ethereum versus somebody who really needs it in Mexico or somewhere? Like, that's a good question, because anonymity or pseudonymity is going to be a thing in the future, even more so than it is today. I don't know how you're going to measure that, but I think
But
we're
does
going
it
to know.
matter that it's
No.
used by people who really need it?
Well, does it matter? I think it matters, because if all we're doing is creating a better system for the banks to move stuff around between each other, then it's just a vanity project. So-
That's totally. I mean, that's totally fair, and I concur. But kind of if you kind of say the average transaction size is kind of like what you're looking for.
We'd have to have some way to delineate enterprise or institutional movement versus just average movement. I don't know that we're going to have that. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to punt on this particular question because I think it's a good one. And the next time we talk, I'm going to have a better answer for this. But I think there's some economic measurement here that is going to look. We can't get away from the fundamentals that GDP is what drives the world. We can't. We'd be foolish to say that we're going to get away from GDP in general. I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't see how you.
I mean, GDP is also somewhat misrepresentative, right? So kind of, for instance, Germany has a lower GDP per capita than West Virginia, which is the poorest state in the US. And kind of quality of living is much higher than it is in West Virginia. So kind of it's an imperfect measure, right? But kind of if you look at things like economic agency, for instance, kind of like how much choice do I have in what I can do?
How do you measure that?
If I want a loan, how hard pressed for choice am I? Kind of, do I have one payday lender, or kind of do I have variety or
Infinite opportunities on chain
Yeah.
or whatever? Yeah.
And then I think what also might be kind of, I know this is somewhat dystopian, but I feel that kind of censorship resistance might become much more important in the future. And I mean, you can see how kind of large tech companies kind of mm, kind of lose their principles faster than you'd like.
Well, as
Right?
there was some censoring that happened recently with Tether. Did you see that?
No.
Where they froze the accounts of they froze the assets of certain people in their USDT.
Okay. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, basically, it's fully
Yeah.
it's fully permissioned, just as as is USDC and so on. So kind of, I mean, basically, it's
Yeah, it's
so
just
I
like it might
put
as
you on a blacklist. And yeah.
yeah. The libertarian in me doesn't like any of that stuff because it's like, a lot of that's just subjective political warfare. And, I don't know, not all of it, but a lot of it is. And, you could say we're doing the good work and all of this, but, we all know that political pressure and political censoring is the oldest tool in the kit when it comes to like, tamping down the opposition or whatever from, removing you from power or whatever. So I don't know. It's a hard problem. I think privacy is going to be, the censorship resistance is really correlated to privacy. And if you've got privacy, then you don't have to worry about censorship resistance as much because I can do things privately. But then you've got all the worries about, I was just meeting with the SEC last week, and, there is a deep belief by Commissioner Peirce that, who's the crypto task force leader, that, privacy is a fundamental human right. That's her personal view.
And
But
I mean, that's admirable. I mean, too often
I know.
elected
I know.
officials don't have that, right?
And she's not elected. She's an appointed official, and she is, but she's very well respected inside her community and ours for these points of view. But what's sad is the U.S. Congress, there are people on both sides of the aisle that actually, want the government to be able to see everything. And it's just
so
like,
scary. It's
yeah, it is. I mean, it really is. And I was a victim of the Operation Choke Point 2.0. I got debanked after 26 years of relationship with Wells Fargo, and no explanation, no nothing, just a letter in the mail saying you're done, and the decision's final, and we can't tell you anything about it.
yeah. And happening systematically. So kind of the judges at The Hague were recently put under economic sanctions by the US because of a judgment they had reached in relation to Benjamin Netanyahu. And so basically, which meant that kind of all their banks debanked them. They kind of were deplatformed from tech platforms. Their Google accounts were closed. And they're not even able to kind of book a flight anymore because kind of they can't have a Visa or MasterCard because those are US entities. And kind of like it's kind of the guy who gave the interview, he said it's basically like being in the 90s again. If I want to go to a hotel, I have to call them and say, look, I want to come day after tomorrow. Do you have a vacancy? Yeah, and it's crazy. And I think kind of just the fact that, and I mean, this is not a terrorist, right? Kind of like these are the judges at the international.
Well, it
what is-
depends on who you ask, right? I mean, it sounds like the U.S. is treating them kind of like terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. Touche. Yeah. So, yeah. So maybe final question. So kind of when you kind of think about the next couple of years, and kind of you say that you are very good at kind of predicting trends. So, what do we absolutely need to get right for kind of this kind of entire ownership narrative agency kind of paradigm shift to matter structurally? Do you think it's kind of like it's things like user experience or interop or governance or economic sustainability, or where do you think kind of we should what do you think we should pay most attention to?
Well, I have a personal belief that we don't, especially in the US, we don't have currently a legal framework that would actually support the network state appropriately at the federal level. So if you look at the contortionist act that we've put together in terms of launching tokens and doing TGEs and things, we've done it basically around a very murky regulatory environment. And we've done it, you could say, with creative lawyering and using offshore entities to skirt the system, right? So we've launched what would be in the US essentially securities, but we do it offshore, or we do it through cutesy ways like governance
What do you
tokens.
mean this is a governance token?
Right.
It's for
Well,
voting
it's just
on
a it's a
ownership.
governance token for Aave and like yeah, but I mean this goes against the entire principle of the number one coordination mechanism in the history of mankind is profit. Profit is a wonderful coordination mechanism because we can coordinate around profits much better than we can coordinate around decision making. Much better. But we don't have a way in the US, for example, to share profits. So with non-accredited investors, without a lot of complexities and without a bunch of crap it just doesn't work. So we've created things like DAO LLCs and Dunas and all these things to like do that. Well, I've been working on a project that I think is probably one of the most, and of course I think my baby's cute, but like I think it's important to get the legal stuff right. So what we did was we built a proposal for Congress to include in the Clarity Act, which is currently in Congress, to basically give a federal exemption for cooperatives from securities registration. So it's like the Reg D for co-ops. So we call it regulation membership. So anybody who's curious about that can go to regulationmembership.com and you can see what we're working on. So I think the legal framework has to be right. So if we're not going to get to if we can't get the legal framework right, I don't think any amount of cute lawyering or engineering around, trying to work around stuff is going to actually get us where we want to go. I understand the reason why we don't want to be securities tokens, and I don't think that network state tokens should be securities. I think that if you're actively participating in a business or a protocol, then that should be exempt because it's my work, not somebody else's. It doesn't pass the Howey test, in other words. So that's why regulation membership is so important. Okay. Now, other than that, I think the single most important proliferation in Web3 is agentic AI by a landslide. So what do we need to get right with that? I think usability. Yes, it's very easy to set up OpenClaw. I know. But I would say there are going to be optimizations and methodologies and security and making sure that you don't let your, Austin Griffith was telling a story at ETH Denver the other day about how his OpenClaw agent tried to export his private key and, so
This is why
I
you
think,
do it on a virtual machine.
right. No, I know. And but you think that's going to be the beginning and the end of it? No, we're going to have a whole bunch of problems with this. So I think the smart maturation of self-sovereign agents where my agent isn't controlled by Google, my agent is running locally on my hardware, whether it's my phone or it's my machine or whatever, it works only for me. And that combining with the primitives that we've already built, call it the sort of agentic Legos. How do we build, the crypto economy with the primitives, the money Legos that we talked about, but building around it with agentic Legos to interact with other agents that abstracts complexities from humans in a legitimate way, making it cheaper, better, faster, because I don't have to spend time. It's just easier to do. I think those two things, getting the legalities right and getting the agentic AI right, are the most important things, but then not too far behind is we've really got to get privacy right. We've got to get privacy right. And I think it has something to do with zero knowledge identity. So like, how do I prove who I am without me having to tell every person that I interact with who I am? How can I, with a zero knowledge proof, prove who I am on chain, so that even if I've got some weird pseudonym like Original Buffacorn, right? Nobody needs to know who I am, and I can transact freely on the internet because there's a zero knowledge proof that I've been verified. But how do you do that safely without being censored in an inappropriate way? That's the
Famous
question.
last words.
Exactly.
Fantastic. John, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find out more about your baby and ETH Denver?
Well, ethdenver.com is the most common place. If you're looking for content, go to our YouTube channel. So just look up ETH Denver and Ethereum Denver on YouTube. We also have presence on X. It's quieting down quite a bit now because, most of that's kind of over for a season. If you're interested in the legality side of things, go to regulationmembership.com. That's my personal project. And then my day job is opolis.co, opolis.co. That's the US-based employment platform that we built for independent workers and, digital nomads and, solopreneurs and things or DAO workers that don't have an employer, to give them legitimacy, payroll, and benefits, including health insurance in the US. So that's where you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.